with the classics and me, Mr. B. I really need to shave, but before we get to that, today we'll be talking about story structure through the lens of Mega Man 2. Now, some of you may be asking, why would we use a video game to talk about story structure? Isn't that something we should be reading a book for? And the answer to that question is yes, of course you should read a book to find out about story structure, but to help supplement your knowledge you're getting from a book, you can also think about other places where stories happen, and video games are obviously a place where story sometimes will happen. Today we're going to be looking at the overall story structure, and I'm going to put up a graphic on the screen here of something that will hopefully look familiar to you. It is the pretty much bog standard story chart that you'll see, just a kind of a graphic organizer for the different parts of a story. And you'll see on the left hand side, it starts with an introduction or some exposition, which leads into some rising action, the climax of the story, falling action, and then finally a resolution. The introduction or the exposition is just there to introduce you to the characters, the plot, exactly what's the situation that is going on. Who is it that the main character is, and what is it that they want? The rising action is then all of the obstacles that try to get in the way of our protagonist being the main character. So rising action is anything that tries to stop your protagonist from getting whatever it is they want in the story will go within the rising action until we get to that final spot at the top there that's called the climax. Climax is the point at which our hero or our protagonist either gets what they want or definitely is never going to get what they want. It's the point where the problem is more or less solved. And saying solved makes it a little bit tricky because sometimes, there's a compromise reached or whatever it is. But more or less, it's about, okay, did our character get what he wanted or not? And once you've answered that question, did they get what they wanted or not, we go on to the falling action. And the falling action is where we find out, okay, now that he just finished defeating whoever it is he needs to defeat, what happens immediately after that? Like, everybody's looking around like, what now? It's the things that happens immediately after the climax. And then finally the resolution is, okay, now that everything's been said and done, what happens to our characters now? Or what is the eventual result of that conflict being solved? That's what you'll find in the resolution. So, without any further ado, pick up the sticks here, and we will take a look at Mega Man 2. So, Capcom, awesome. Licensed by Nintendo of America. So, they're going to start us off with a cool intro sequence. This is one of the cooler intro sequences that were there for the 8-bit era. And then this is just kind of reviewing what happened in the first game. But here they go. They give us our problem and our exposition. After he was defeated, he created more robots to try to fight Mega Man, and now Mega Man is called on to have to defend the world again and take out these evil robot masters created by Dr. Wily. And it's all very cool. And the music comes in. I'm sure you can tell by my blurry head how much I'm enjoying this song. I've never played on difficult before, but normal is difficult enough, so we're gonna go with that. So we just had our exposition, now we need to go to the rising action. So if our exposition has set up our problem to be, alright, we need to defeat the evil Dr. Wily. Okay, so now that I'm looking at this here, my rising action is going to be going through and defeating all of these different robot masters. We're going to start with Metal Man, and I'll tell you why in a minute here. But really, anything that happens that's leading up to that climax moment in your story is going to fall within the realm of a rising action. So, very cool conveyor belts. Metal Man, it makes sense that he's in some kind of an industrial zone here. The reason why I go to Metal Man first is he's pretty easy to defeat with just your normal Mega Buster. And so it makes sense to kind of go to him first. Also, his weapon that you get is really good to use for almost all parts of the game. So, here we go. Now, you might notice there's a lot of flicker. That's an 8-bit kind of... I can't believe I just died already. That is embarrassing. Maybe if I spend less time talking about screen flicker and more time not dying, we'll be better off. But in the Rising Action, sometimes your characters face setbacks, and they just have to dust themselves off and keep going. As I was saying, though, the Nintendo was not a super powerful machine, and so there were limitations on what it could do, and one of those limitations was on the number of moving parts, basically, that could be moving at any given time. All of your different characters in an 8-bit 2D game like this, the different animated characters are called sprites, and in Mega Man there was a limit, and a limit in all Nintendo games. That's partially why Mega Man can only normally shoot 2 or 3 bullets at a time, because if he shot more than that, it would be harder on the processor to make things work. Now, most of the time it doesn't matter too much because you can't. I mean, if I turn on auto fire, you'll definitely see that you can only do 3 at a time. Right? But if I get super close to something, I'll get another one of these goobers up here, I can actually end up shooting like 1,000,000 at a time, because as long as there are only 3 bullets on screen, I can just keep going. So if those bullets hit something right away, that's done. That was probably a little boring. I just kind of started to ramble there. I'll try to avoid that in the future. I don't like to use auto fire even though I have the option, because it seems like cheating. Okay. So we made it past there, so that's another obstacle in our Rising Action that we have completed. Now the Rising Action, you'll notice, like, this is going to be the bulk of your story, really. And most of the game is going to be Rising Action. I mean, there's only one big climax to the story, and that doesn't come until the end. So obviously, everything else is going to be Rising Action. So the majority of a story is going to be the Rising Action. Especially things like the Falling Action are generally very brief. Resolutions can be kind of long, but for the most part, the biggest part of your story should probably be the Rising Action. A lot of books sometimes get heavy on exposition, and at a certain point it's like, stop telling me about the character and just show me what the character does, and those actions are going to illustrate better than you talking at the beginning of your story for 8 years about, oh, this is Michael. Michael's a strong guy. He blah blah blah. He uses his muscles more than he uses his brain. Well, you could do that. You could go on in the exposition like that, or somewhere in the Rising Action, there could be a problem that the heroes have to solve, and that character is just like, I got this, and then you describe how they use their crazy muscle strength to solve the problem, and that's a way to show the audience what your characters are all about. Oh my gosh! Oh, if this is a game over screen, I'm gonna die. Let's try another one. Let's try a different one. We'll do stage select again, just for a little change of pace. Bubble Man. I know I can take out Bubble Man. Bubble Man was the one that, when I was a kid, I would usually do Bubble Man first. This probably looks like a hot mess with that flashing screen. All these toads always make me mad. One thing that always bothered me about, or didn't really bother me, but was always funny to me about Mega Man games is, so these are the robots that an evil mad scientist creates to try to take over the world. What is it about a big metal frog that spits out little metal frogs that's going to help to conquer the world? Not quite sure exactly how that works, but, you know, I'm not a mad scientist, so there you go. Same thing with this. Like a hermit crab that just rolls back and forth, that doesn't seem particularly menacing to me. So, But it's good because I can get little power-ups and stuff. Never hurts to have power-ups. One thing I'll say is you'll notice that between the last stage and this stage, obviously there's like a big difference. The last one was at some kind of a factory or something. This one's underwater. In your rising action, you usually want to have a pretty good amount of variety to it. You don't want to have a lot of repetition specifically of things. I'm trying to think of a good example. So like if Harry Potter, in each of the books leading up to his confrontation with Voldemort, if every book was about him fighting a troll, that would be kind of... That would be... I recorded this episode once before and didn't like the sound quality, so I was like, oh, I'll just go through and do it again. Yeah, not going anywhere near as well as the first one. But anyway, as I was saying, if every Harry Potter leading up to the final climax end with Voldemort was just Harry fighting trolls, that would get boring really quickly. And so, just like they do in Mega Man, each level is a new location, generally new enemies. They don't recycle a ton of them. And so the challenge is always fresh and kind of new rather than something that's been repeated a bunch of times. Oh my god. And this too, like, who thinks of a giant fish that shoots out little scrimps to try to fight? That really is the definition of a madman, isn't it? And then these frogs again? Oh my gosh. I initially tried to record this episode's content with Mega Man 1, and that game is a lot harder than this one is, although I'm not particularly showing you how easy this one is by dying 100 times. So this is tricky. This game is more forgiving than some of the other ones. Ooh, okay, so I made it to Dr. Wily's lair, or the Robot Master's lair. So this is the point, like, this is leading up to, okay, we went through all those things. If we're just looking at this stage, this is the climax of this stage, okay? This is the point at which we realize, is Mega Man going to defeat Bubble Man or not? And if I remember right, Bubble Man is kind of a pushover. Yeah, because you can just kind of hammer away on him. They put those at the top like you're really going to jump that high. Those little, like, landmine looking things. Yeah, see, he's not even strong enough to really make it a big deal. So, okay, climax is over. And now we need to know, okay, so I just defeated the Robot Master in the falling action. I'm going to find out what happens directly after that. So as a result of defeating Bubble Man, I get equipped with Bubble Lead, which is probably one of the more stupid things that you can get in the world. Just putting it out there. So now we defeated him, and now what's the aftermath of that? So the aftermath of that is, well, there's still a lot more to do before we get to Wily. And so the resolution of our story is kind of not so much a cliffhanger, but more of a, okay, now we need to move on to the next task. And I think that's where we're going to stop for today, though. Only because I don't want to keep dying and end up staying up until midnight trying to beat this game. But remember, for our story structure, exposition at the beginning. Most of your story is going to be rising action, the things that happen as your characters try to solve the problem that the story is all about. The climax is going to be the point where they solve the problem. They either defeat the enemy, they find the magic chalice, whatever they're looking for. That's going to be the climax. Did they get what they wanted or not? Falling action is, okay, now that they just did that, what happens right now? What is happening to them now that they have chalice, whatever, beat the guy? And then finally your resolution is, okay, now that all happened, what now? What now for the characters? What are they going to do now that the story is complete? Thanks for tuning in. Since this is YouTube, I think I'm obligated to ask you to hit the subscribe button and leave comments And we'll see you next time. Bye bye.